So, Ashraf, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But before we go into the future, can you give us a little bit about your own backgrounds? Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a place that's got a couple of names. Okay, it's got three names. First of all, the answer is Johannesburg. Okay, that's right. Born, bred, Joburg's home. Okay, specifically the suburb has got a few names. The one is called Vrededorp or Vrededorp in Afrikaans, right? The English name was Pageview, same place, right? But the colloquial name that we used to call it was called Fitas. What that really means, I don't know, okay? Yeah. But the place is like virtually 1 kilometer from the Brixton Tower, so near about a kilometer away from the SABC, which is amazing because I don't spend so much time at the SABC. And yeah, probably about 5 kilometers from the Joburg city.
Right. And what was your dream career when you grew up?
Well, let me just say this, in terms of growing up, why that place was important is, why are we not there? We, in apartheid, in the apartheid times, we were sort of ghettoed to live in that space, right? And I think when we were 12 or 13, like many other people, two things happened. My dad had a business, and then all their goods were thrown out because they were evicted, because of the area then being a white area. And then all the people were scattered to move 5 k's, 20 k's, 30 kilometers away. So that community, that land is still there. Of course, people now can live there again after a long period. But that community of a very mixed black community, so people who are African, colored, Indian, who all live together there, and Chinese as well, all completely separated for those years. So the point is, many of us who connect with people from that Fitas community, even now, as kids or as light years, as I would call it, right? We link to an umbilical cord in terms of that's where we come from.
Okay, so when you grew up, Ashraf, what was your dream career?
It's an interesting question you ask, because when I thought about it, I'm like, actually, what was it? And this may surprise you. I don't know if I had a particular focus, which may well be a leadership shortcoming. So I can't remember if somebody ever sat me down. It's like, what was it? Okay. So the answer possibly is, I don't know. At the back of my mind, at some stage, if you asked me, when people get asked, like, to say something, I probably I do remember throwing two names of careers out, okay, as a possibility of doing. One was law, but very much the activist law, right? And the other, I remember saying, like, I probably should become a journalist. Now, this sounds funny because a lot of my space revolves around that, but I don't think I made an active decision to do that, okay, all those years ago. What I did do, which I think you may find very, very interesting, right, is as a youngster, and I'm talking of like as a 10-year-old youngster, when people used to play board games, so we come from a very particularly sporty family, particularly in cricket in particular, right? And we used to play our own board games at home, besides action games. For some reason, I started playing those games, but then giving commentary on those games. So if one thinks of playing a game like Ludo, for example, or Trivial Pursuit, one thing is playing the game, but the other is somebody commentating. And I actually gave commentary on the board games that I used to play. It's something to note. And then when I went to school and at high school as well, I often used to do sort of mock commentaries of cricket and soccer in particular, okay? So you just imagine there's a game taking place and do that. Why I'm saying that, it suggested subliminally that communications and broadcasting was a space I should get into, but did I plan for it? No. And I think perhaps why not is that at that stage in South Africa, if you were black, you don't dream along those lines. Like in apartheid South Africa, you don't expect to become the president if you're not white. So in the same way, even if you had those skills, they were there, but they were never lifted off the page into something more profound.
So who inspired you in those early days?
Excuse me. The link to those spaces, I think a lot of inspiration came from listening to the BBC radio. So, I mean, I can say the obvious that there were lots of different people. My father inspired me, my mother did, my uncles, but in different ways. So there wasn't one particular person to say that this person shaped my thoughts. I don't think so, okay? But I think what did, right, is I got very hooked on, even as a young boy, right, well before my time, sort of listening to the radio, listening to the BBC, and I think it had an impact on two things. One, in terms of speaking and the way I speak and the way I broadcast, because I do that. But the second part is the insatiable thirst for knowledge and knowledge seeking, and that has stayed with me for the rest of my life. The other, which I think is funny, my father used to buy magazines, like, well, comics actually, right? But there was a comic, and you may be aware of it, called Classics Illustrated. So it was based upon the great novel, the great classics novels, right? You know, Tale of Two Cities, David Copperfield, all that sort of thing, right? Mainly very with Eurocentric, obviously, right? But they were available in comic form. So as a young boy from the age of 6 or something, you would be able to buy these classic illustrated in comic form for children, you know, like Jack and Jill initially, even that type of sort of cartoon setup, right? And then as you graduate, you get to more serious things. But what is important as a result of that, I ended up reading many of these classics long before I should be reading them, and how that impacted. So I certainly need to thank my late father for that. It impacted on me on doing one thing, being a reader for the rest of my life. And as a result of that, I've never been bored. No matter where I go, if you left me alone for 5 minutes now, I've got something to read, okay? And it has stayed with me no matter where I've been up to now.
And Ashraf, looking back over your career, would you say there was a major turning point?
Yeah, so I mean, I've had two things in terms of career. First part, I used to be together with my wife, we started, and I'm looking at your outfit that you're wearing right now, right? All bright orange and lovely colors. So we used to import very, very upmarket fabrics, right? And then sell them off now. So for example, I would go to, you have a German background, and I would go to the trade fairs in Frankfurt, right? And buy a very, very upmarket thing. So there was that life, okay? A long time before I got into media. And then I got into broadcasting probably 10 years later than I should have, maybe even 15 years later. And that, of course, for me, the second part is the more important legacy, right? What inspired me to get, I mean, is there a turning point? The turning point is this, and it's bizarre. So I used to be the chairperson of a junior football club, okay? And community radio had just started in South Africa around around 90, well, of course, 94 onwards. So probably 95, 96, it had just started. And that was a way of democratizing the airwaves for many people. Now, up to then, especially in black communities and others, the chances of getting your name on national radio was just out, okay? Right. So we started this local soccer club that I was involved in called Homestead Park. We're involved in a junior soccer tournament, and I had heard there's a community radio station called The Voice that just opened up in my area, and my call to them was this: would you like to cover this junior soccer tournament? It's juniors, it's up to the age of 16 from about 6 years old. If you do that, you will be talking about those young children, those young boys getting their names on air. Parents will listen in because they're going to get excited. And then you have an audience, and what you do with the audience the next day is your problem. But what I'm saying to you is we can bring you an audience that you can then captivate for your actual programming beyond the sport. And they're like, okay, that's fine. Can you help us with guests? And I said, that's fine. So I was being a producer without being aware of being a producer, and I assisted them with guests. And the interviews were going to be done on a Saturday. And the day before the interviews, they called me, I think probably even in the morning Saturday, like, you know what? We've seen with our team of community broadcasters, not one of them can talk sport. They can talk politics and religion and other things. They can't do sport. So can you do the same interviews that you had asked us to? Can you do the interviews yourself? Now, up to then, the thought of me getting involved in media as a broadcaster, as a host, never entered my mind. I ended up therefore doing the interviews with the same people that I had facilitated them doing the interviews. and I'd spoken to them, and I remember very clearly within like 5 minutes of interviewing these people, and my very first interview was like 6 people, which you can never really do, right? But one of the people from the station management, while I was talking, put up a sign for me to read from within the studio with the glass doors, and it simply said something like, your enthusiasm is infectious. Welcome aboard. Right. And it's bizarre because it's a one-line affirmation that, hold it, you've made your mark already, and I haven't stopped talking since then. So it is a turning point. There were some specifics that I did, which I can happily share with you then thereafter.
And Ashraf, what is driving you today?
Today it's a movement specifically called Champion South Africa, and the movement exists to move South Africa from a mid-table nation, because I love using sporting analogies. We're very much mid-table. We mess up, we can get relegated, but I want us to win the league. So we are inspired to move South Africa from a mid-table nation to a champion nation. I'm inspired by the dream and the vision one day of having perhaps the Secretary General of the United Nations holding aloft a trophy that doesn't say best rugby team or best soccer or cricket team, and it says the champion nation for this year is South Africa. I'm inspired by that. In terms of my purpose, therefore, is to build people into the champion people that are needed to build a champion nation.
Right. So Ashraf, let's talk about leadership. And I know it's a big question, but what does the future of leadership mean to you?
It means that we must always be aware, as a leader, you are accountable to a constituency. If you're a leader of a family, you're accountable to a family constituency. If you're a leader of an organization or a country, you're accountable. This notion of leaders who lead for themselves, and some people do it and others don't, but it's not very fashionable that we are constantly reminding ourselves to be aware that leaders are responsible executors of a mission, and I think there's got to be a greater drive for that. Leaders serve, we understand that, but we are at all times responsible. So, for example, when I'm involved as an organization through Champion South Africa, but through other family and business interests, and I'm thrusting a leadership position, I try and put one individual, a picture of that one individual who could be a shareholder, and maybe even a lowly shareholder, at the center of all our, not discussions, of all our decision making. And the question to ask, therefore, is like, are the decisions we're making, does that serve the interests of that person, that imaginary human being, or not? Because if we're not doing that, then we're actually not acting as that person's leader. And
Ashraf, what have you learned from your own journey that you consider most important for building future leaders?
For my journey by and large has been very much as a broadcaster. So as a broadcaster, talk show host, and perhaps wannabe lawyer, you understand that you have advocacy and you have agency, right? And what I've learned is the responsibility of being in a position to actually ask questions on behalf of people. So again, as an interviewer, as a speaker, it's not even about the guest. It's always, how can I deliver a message to the audience, because that's the person or the people that I represent. Now, it sounds simple, but for me it's profound. And if you deviate from that very, very profound yet simple line, you're deviating from your entire message of your role.
Now, when you speak to aspiring leaders and maybe even your own children, what is it you tell them about social media? How should they handle and navigate social media to build their own leadership brand?
I would say that those that say social media is a whole lot of nonsense, they are totally unaware of the incredible power of social media to influence, to impact people. And like driving a car, you can drive 200 kilometers an hour on a road that's only meant to drive 100 k's. The decision is yours whether you're going to crash or not, but it doesn't mean that the Autobahn itself, and I'm using highway Autobahn, is actually wrong. The Autobahn has got to be built. So the social media as an Autobahn is important. Okay, the question is how you use it, and my advice to them is is to get on it because you are in a position of influence. So the notion of influencing and what does influence mean? Influence is not reckless influence. Influence is being able to pass a message of something you feel strongly about to somebody else. Okay, so I'll give an example. I come from an Islamic background, so on the last day or the last sermon that the Prophet Muhammad gave, right? He said something like, take this message and share this message with those that are not here. So those that are here have the responsibility of passing on the message to those who are not here. Now, he's been described in the Quran, and the Arabic word is Rahmatul lil Alameen, which means mercy unto the world. So his character has been described as a mercy unto the world, and as you know, he's then the founder of one of the great faiths in the world. Okay, so when he said that 1430 odd years ago, what's the translation for us now, an interpretation? It is passing a message to those that are not here. And the way we do that now, we don't have to physically meet people. We use social media to do that. So I would tell my children, I would tell others that use social media, but be aware of how you use it as a means of constructive engagement with all people that you encounter.
Right. Now, Ashraf, if you were to design a curriculum for future leaders, what are the new skills that you would like to factor in?
It's a big question. I need to spend a year thinking about it, okay? Look, the simple answer, I haven't thought that through totally, okay? But I think the one skill is the skill of what I call it the champion mind. That means understanding, so it's not new, okay? But it's maybe being more aware of it, okay? That understand that the mind is the primary decision maker in terms of where you want to go and where you do not want to go. So if I go back to my own journey, which was, at no stage was it planted into my mind that become a broadcaster, become a presenter of radio, TV, become a lawyer, becoming whatever. It was there and nobody told me. So a lot more time has to be spent understanding what I call the mind, or what I now call the champion mind. That means the mind can be a champion for yourself and take you to a champion place. That's the one skill factor that I would definitely encourage, right? The other one, and it's not new for me, is read a lot aloud, because I've done that. And as we know, in an increasingly complex society or world, no matter what we do, the ability to communicate is greater now than ever before, because too often people are miscommunicating. So I would encourage that level of communication that needs to take place, right, as a skill. The third one would be the need to be agile in your skills. So again, this is not new. I mentioned this on LinkedIn the other day because it's not mine. Okay,
sure.
You need to unlearn as much as you need to learn. So the willingness to learn is important, but the preparedness to want to unlearn concepts that no longer work is just as important in your learning and in your skill set.
Now, Ashraf, talking about the journey of champions, what are, and obviously obstacles are part of anybody's journey, especially a champion journey. What are the obstacles you would advise future leaders to be aware of and maybe expect in their own champion journey?
The fact that you not can be distracted, you will be distracted, and it's really up to you on that journey that you want to take, that you do not be distracted. So you've heard this whole story about focus, and you see, focus sometimes sounds very, very complex, but I love sporting analogies, Nick, because they just work. They're so simple. Okay, so whether you're playing rugby, soccer, or cricket, the goal is obvious. Get the goal, get the try, get the wicket, get the runs. That's the goal. So in between that match that you're playing, there are distractions, and the distractions come from the opposition, who's out there to prevent you from reaching your goal. But in sport, although they're out to prevent you from reaching your goal, you have a clear plan as to how you want to get the goal. And when you are faced with this opposition and this pushback against your goal, you know in your mind that you will never lose sight of the goal. Now, and then ultimately, hopefully, you will score the goal. Now, if we can apply that same image in our working lives, then we will be aware of goal setting and goal planning and goal activations and getting the goals all the time. I don't think too many of us do it all the time. So that it's done, but it's not done at a level around the world that we should.
Right. Now, Ashraf, as a leader, as a mentor to future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
I better think about this. I'm not too sure because it doesn't jump off the page, but I can tell you one thing. I'm very aware of the people. You see that there's a formal mentorship and there's an informal mentorship, and I think people listening to us right now are being mentored. They should be making notes right now. Okay, so in the informal mentorship space, I'm very aware of people who will come back to me and say, you said this on air, or you said this when you were program directing, or you gave a talk, and when you met me, and I took your advice, and this is what's happened to me. Like just 2 weeks ago, or maybe even a week ago, somebody on Twitter said, you spoke to me, you interviewed me on radio 2 years ago, and this is where I am, and I'm so proud to know that I can share this with you, and thank you for that. Then I've had other people saying something like, I used to have a feature called In the Spotlight before, and for many people, In the Spotlight was a great way for them to listen to other leaders, but it's a great way to say, I would have known that I arrived when I actually get interviewed by you. But how is this one for a very modest form of leadership? Because the name of this person is particularly important. So I've asked him, and I'll tell you just now who he is. I asked him to be my In the Spotlight guest. And he's like, I'm not ready. Okay? I'm not ready for it in terms of, not that I can't talk, I don't think I'm worthy of it. But when I'm worthy of it, I'll tell you. And 2 or 3 years later, and of course, he's not somebody I didn't know. We had met often. And about 3 years later, he finally said, Ashraf, I'm ready. I think I'm worthy of being a guest of the caliber that you've interviewed for me to be considered as being in the spotlight. So now you can talk to me. And of course, I did. And that person is the chief executive officer of a foundation in the name of the most significant person in South Africa's politics, which is Nelson Mandela. So I'm talking about Sello Hatang, right? So Sello's level of awareness, it's not a false, it's not a modesty based upon insecurity. I think it's an incredible strength of saying, this is who I am, that's where I need to be your guest. And 3 years later he was, and I've remembered that because I think it can apply to many of us.
So Ashraf, are there any role models of leadership that future leaders should study and learn from?
You mean specific types of leadership? I'm afraid not. I think in today's world, let's say this much, the opportunities to learn what leaders do, they're available now to a level that we've never had in our lives before. So you don't need to rely on one parent or uncle or aunt to meet you once every year for 5 minutes. And the opportunities are podcasts, LinkedIn, social media, YouTube, going to events, whatever they are, the opportunities are there every single moment in your life. So my advice to people would be, you must grab those opportunities. That you must, want to lead, you must want to do that. You must connect with what I call the champion mind, right? And understand that your mind can be a champion. And then once you understand that part, then open yourselves up to different avenues of leadership. Because I'm saying to you, it's not a one-size-fits-all. You can't read one book and say, I've learned something from that book and that's it exclusively. No, you probably need to read and to listen and to hear leadership lessons every single day of your life. But I am saying the opportunity now is greater than ever before.
And Ashraf, where can our listeners get hold of you?
Well, so one, I'm on social media as Ashraf Garda, ASHRAFGARDA, business spell it, ASHRAFGARDA, and that's on social media, meaning Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. That's one. Champion South Africa is also on all those pages, and you can find us, right? I'll flash out my email address, which is probably the best thing, Ashraf, ASHRAF, Ashraf at Champion South Africa. So all one word, Ashraf at championsouthafrica.co.za. And that's the way to connect with me. What I'd like to share, if I can,
Sure.
is a particular line that means a lot to me, and it's very much the mantra of Champion South Africa now, right? As we move to build champions in the new year, is this and I want you to reflect on it. Champion people build champion people, and then champion people build champion nations. So I'll reflect on it. If you look at the history of the world, civilizations rise and fall by the quality of its people, not by the quality of its geography, because geography is an advantage. You know, if you're in a country where there's gold, well, you have an advantage. If you have some other forms of diamonds or other minerals, it's an advantage, or maybe a location like Great Britain, I would think, right, or Singapore. But it's not exclusively so. Ultimately, civilizations rise and fall, and reflect on the history of civilizations by the quality of its people. So you're only really one of the champion people if you can build other champion people. If you can, I've heard this before, one of the great primary role of a leader is to grow other leaders. So champion people must build other champion people, and then champion people must build champion nations. And in the South African context, for me, it's champion people build champion nations, champion people will build champion South Africa.
Right. So Ashraf, last but not least, is there one piece of advice that you would really like to convey to future leaders that they should implement in their own lives?
Well, accept the fact that you are a citizen of your country. Now, whether you are living in South Africa, Singapore, Germany, Great Britain, Turkey, wherever it may be, as you're listening to me now, you are a citizen of your country. You must make the link between your success and your country's success. When you win, your country wins. When you lose, your country loses. Conversely, when your country wins, you win. So can you make the link between what your input and how it impacts on the output of your country?
Well, Ashraf, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future and reminding us that it is our duty to build champions.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time, and I'm inspired by what you do, and I've always been inspired by what you do. So that's the other part, if I may. Can I say this in conclusion? So we use a phrase, or we use a term called networking. So look at the levels. You can meet people, and that's called meeting. You can network, which suggests that you're meeting people with, maybe swapping of cards. Okay. So I've replaced the word networking with what I call champion connecting, or making champion connections. Because champion connections is networking, but with the sole purpose of you becoming a champion and the person you meet with also becoming a champion. That means the level of your interactions will raise the level of the quality of what you do in both cases. And that for me is a lot more profound. So I indulge, like meeting you now, is a form of champion connecting.
CC. Thank you.
There we are.